Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. If you've been following AI over the last few months, you've probably heard the term Agentic AI or Agentic Commerce, and it comes up more and more often. If you strip it all back, though, the shift is quite simple. It seems that we're moving from a world where customers make decisions to one where software increasingly makes decisions on their behalf. And that's the real change. AI is no longer just analyzing or recommending, it's starting to act. And that's where the idea of agentic commerce really starts to matter. To explore what that really means in practice, for those of us who don't get to spend 5 or 6 hours of our day delving into the realms of AI, I am joined by Mark Galvin, partnerships at Antavo and Bloomrech, and Attila Kechmar, CEO of Antavo. They've both been immersed in AI since its early development, and if I ever want to know anything about it, they are the two people that I go to. So we've brought them here together for you today. And I guess a real question for brands, and something that I really want anybody watching this to do, please put your questions into the comments. We want this to be really useful. So please, if you've come to this thinking, I want to go away knowing this today, please pop it into the comments and questions for us to answer for you. But the real question for brands is, if an AI agent is making the decision, how do brands show up in that moment, and what can actually influence the outcome regarding the customer? So over to you, Mark. I know you know so much on this subject, so I'm going to try and kind of chair this for you and Attila, but please tell us a bit more about what agentic AI is on the surface of it.
Sure. So I think we're probably going to drill down on this topic. So I'll start quite high and we can go more detailed as we move in. But from my perspective, agentic commerce is the use of software agents that can act on behalf of the customer across parts of the shopping journey, most commonly including things like the product discovery, comparison of products, pricing, comparison, right the way through in some instances to checkout, and how that experience works across LLMs and agents is kind of varying. But in practical terms, just to give it a non-technical kind of positioning, a consumer might actually go and prompt an agent with something like, find me the best black leather ankle boots under £180, available in a size 5 that can arrive by Friday, and give me the best loyalty or member value. And then the agent will go and handle several steps that previously required the shopper to compare and decide manually. And then go through a number of websites, forums, review sites, all sorts of things to be able to come to that decision. So it's really moving classic e-commerce personalization to a point of autonomy. And if you think about the traditional cycle was in e-commerce was around reacting to clicks and page views on a brand-owned interface, such as the website, to be able to build that. Agentic commerce, from my perspective, actually introduces a delegated decision-making process where the customer increasingly asks software to do work for them. So it's doing a lot of the heavy lifting and the effort and connecting with the right brand and with the right product from that brand.
I'm on mute.
Yeah, maybe I'm adding some
comments. Do you want to go ahead?
To this, so let's make it as a discussion. And hi, everyone. So I think the way I would start it, we are living in a very transformative era. And if we think about AI, which is around us for like 3 years, actually 3.5 years from now, AI is a technology, but the agentic is the actual solution that we are experiencing and going to experience, which will shape our life more and more down the road. And agentic, I know everyone is hearing about this, but basically agentic is making decisions on behalf of the consumer, behalf of us. That's why it's so different than everything else before. And just think about this. When everyone went from offline to online, that was a huge change, huge, directional shift. But I think the agentic is even bigger than this one. And the reason for that is because when we went from offline to online, still the center of the decision maker was the human. But in this case, it's going to be the agent. That's why it's even bigger shift than the previous one. So, and the technology is shaping and developing so fast. So therefore, we and everyone else should take a look and spend lots of time on this technology and this game changer solution.
Great, thank you. So we've touched on the surface of that, and hopefully everybody has an understanding of what agentic AI, agentic commerce is. I guess really now, what do brands need to start doing now? Because I think like there's this concept of, okay, that's where you say the future is going to be, but how do people get started on it? You know, what's the first steps to take to make sure that they're not getting left behind somehow?
Yeah, sure. So I think the first thing is that they've got to start showing up, and in order to show up, that's going to evolve quite considerably the stack that they use, the technology stack that's powering them and enabling that showing up. I already kind of mentioned that we're in this kind of point where we're shifting from browsing to delegation. So instead of I'll go and search your website, customers are increasingly going to go and ask an agent, and that agent's going to perform a number of different tasks, not just searching for a product, then looking at reviews and looking at other information. It's going to combine that data together automatically and simplify the process for them. I already, myself personally, have moved away from Google Browser, terrible as it sounds, into this world where I can do tabular analysis of all the products that I'm looking at and compare them side by side, who can deliver the fastest and which ones have got the best reviews, right? So, and I think that's kind of shifting quite considerably. But the real question from an architecture perspective and a stack perspective is, what makes it possible, and how do brands start considering their stack in terms of how they show up? So the thing that makes it possible is that there are various protocols are out there. There's actually 8 in total, but there are 3 key ones which I think are there today that are being widely adopted. The first one is something called UCP, and I hate acronyms, so I'm going to actually I'll mention them but then explain what they are, because I think
there are a lot of acronyms where AI is concerned, and they're very similar as well, so it's easy to get them muddled. So please do explain when you use one. Yeah,
exactly that. So yeah, UCP is Universal Commerce Protocol. In simplistic terms, it's an emerging way that compliant agents can discover products, they can build carts, and they can transact across merchants. You've got ACP, which is the Agentic Commerce Protocol, and that is one of the models being discussed for agent-driven shopping flows, particularly around AI system ecosystems. And then the one which is actually the fastest trending one at the moment when you compare all of these is MCP, which is the Model Context Protocol. And that is a way that LLMs, which is like ChatGPT, the things that we're using on a regular basis, can connect to real tools and systems such as search, merchandising, loyalty, instead of relying on just generative text to actually build stuff out. And it moves away from the traditional kind of API approach of feeding stuff in. It provides these tools automatically to find the right tool to answer the right question for the consumer. So one thing to kind of consider is, like, if agents can execute, they still need a reason to choose one brand over another. This is where I get to. So you find the right product, but it's available in 3 places. How do you then shift that paradigm so that the person then buys from your brand? So I think in an agentic world, this is where, over to you, Attila, I think loyalty becomes a key part of the algorithm. And I was interested in your perspective, actually, like how loyalty plays a part in the strategy, because obviously there has to be some differentiation other than a product and a price and a delivery metric that enables that person to actually choose one brand over another in that search experience, right?
Yeah. First of all, that's definitely the loyalty. Loyalty is a differentiator, one of the key differentiator in this story. And when it comes to taking a look at the different brands and how they are acting or behaving, or they are thinking that this is the right moment of jumping on this train, I see 2 different type of groups. The first one is ones that they see loyalty mainly as a reward program. For them, this is maybe too early yet to talk about the agentic and this shift. But I also see that there are other group of companies. Obviously, this group is rather small, and rather bigger organizations are thinking about this, but they see loyalty as part of the broader decision layer, and which is the key, and they see that loyalty is going to be the key differentiator when it comes to dealing with agents or feeding with relevant information to the agents. Okay.
Great. So in terms of kind of what's actually changing right now, what are the signals? Are there things customers could already notice that's happening now? And I do have a question that I'll introduce later on, which is about bad AI. But for now, let's talk about what are the signals that this is happening, and what are the moves that we're seeing currently, Mark?
Yeah, sure. So I spend a lot of time doing research in this area, and I think if you start to look at very high level signals, one thing that's quite evident is a lot of brands still can't even track agent activity to their website. So I saw a survey the other day, and it's something like 3,000 websites were analysed, and something like 63% of those sites had seen AI generated traffic to those websites. But the vast majority of people aren't actually tracking that activity. So then what happens is, agentic commerce is working, it's driving people to the site, but people aren't able to really track and therefore attribute like those purchases made through that channel today, right? So that's one of the signals that we kind of see. And yet some of the analysis actually shows that traffic that comes from an agentic commerce route converts at 2 to 3 times the rate that traditional direct organic traffic does. So
because to your point, presumably those people have done so much more research by the time they get there.
Yeah, you've got it's the difference between a cold visitor that hits your homepage and then abandons the site straight away, where we see it as a bounce, right? So if you hit the homepage, you don't click a second or a third page, you leave within a time frame, that's a bounce. You're getting qualified leads coming in. They've already done their research. They've already done their discovery. They already know what they want. So it's a buyer that's coming with a significant buying intent signal that's very different. So being able to differentiate, between a direct visit to the site and one that's been referred through an agentic source means you've got to plug in personalization and other aspects to be able to drive that first time conversion. It's got to be absolutely critical for people to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. So that's the journey on the website. But even, if there are marketers on this call who aren't thinking about optimizing for that, they're not tracking that traffic, and they're not thinking about how they can list there, that very top of the funnel piece is a place where they really, really need to be spending time at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, if you can't segment on that data, how do you work out the impact of people from an agentic commerce route and the impact they have on average order value? What does it have? Do you have a higher average order value when someone's done more research before? How does it have an impact on customer lifetime value? Something that loyalty is a big contributor to, but how do those agentic people from a source compare with the people that are just buying direct in the conventional traditional model? And how does that affect segmentation around things like people with high return rates? Because you're buying through this agentic route, are you trusting LLMs to the point that the product that comes through maybe has a higher return rate, even though it has a higher conversion rate? So there's a lot of unknowns for brands. If they can't connect the dots, it's not just about the personalization of the purchase, it's about the second, the third purchase. That's the repeat purchase customer, and that's where long-time customer loyalty is going to be driven from, and customer value.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, that the dialogue so far kind of raises a question really about what actually needs to change in that stack. So if somebody's doing their research before they land on your website, then you need to personalize your website. What needs to change in the stack compared to what brands are running today?
So I think the way that I would tackle it is, if we look at it from a Bloomrech tech stack perspective and how we kind of consider it, we started by supporting conversational commerce. So we have experiences that we can power that enable the customer to interactively explore and find the right product on your website. And we can factor in things like third-party data from other platforms. So we can take into account ratings and reviews, AI sizing. We can even do the handoff to the live agent So the person, okay, I think I want this product, but it says it's not available until this point. Can I speak to a person about this because I want to see if I can pay extra to get it quicker, for example? That kind of live agent handoff, those are all experiences that could be delivered today. But of course, that's very much about conversational commerce experience. Agentic commerce kind of goes a step further. So what we've seen is that, through Bloomrech Discovery, connected through Lumi Connect, which is our MCP server, we can expose that same search, that same merchandising and recommendation logic that powers the website directly to the LLM agents. And in doing so, the agent asks what product best fits this customer in this context, and it's not guessing. It's actually using that same logic that we use to deliver the website experience directly within the LLM. So it's calling the real discovery brain of the solution. And then on the engagement side of things, talking back to the marketer, the shift is from fixed journeys to more dynamic execution. So we all know that we've all been out there, we've seen these customer journeys being built out, and they're all kind of pre-built journeys. But in this instance, the agents can trigger the right journey based on the context. You can do it based on the intent, and you can do it based on the task. And tools like Bloomrech Engagement then act as the orchestration layer underneath that. So it's a much more dynamic experience that's going to pivot based on the customer rather than just a fixed and rigid set of predefined rules in a typical kind of autonomous campaign that's been run in the past. And then the last part's the analytics. If your segments and performance data are accessible, agents can learn what works. It can learn which audiences to optimize on, and it can help to continue to optimize those decisions over time as well. So those are kind of critical paths to using some of those protocols and tying some of this stuff together to deliver some of those experiences in the real world.
Hey, Mark, just let me add a comment to the personalization piece. And, in this industry, we are talking about personalization for a decade or even longer than a decade now. And now we are getting into the hyper personalization. But when you were mentioning the journeys, customer journeys, the next thing that we see is going to be the personalized journeys, the generated experiences to the segment of one, which means everyone will have their own journey when it comes to, getting the visuals, getting the answers, getting the whole experience. And of course, when it comes to agentic, it won't be about visuals. It will be about more the right information to the agents who act and make decisions on behalf of the consumer. And then optimization is going to be a big piece because we need to learn, we need to understand, and that you just said about if we cannot track what the attribution and cannot build the attribution models out well enough, then it's going to be a challenge. But ultimately, everyone needs to prepare for the hyper-personalized customer journeys that the consumers will demand, not demand, maybe it's not the right expression, but they want to get this kind of experience from the good brands.
Yeah, I think it's less demand, it's expect, right? We expect that when we phone the customer service line, that the person we spoke to knows what product we just looked at the website. We expect that kind of connected experience, and agentic commerce is the first opportunity for brands to really connect that experience across the customer life cycle. You're absolutely
100%.
Yeah.
Great. Sorry, I always have to unmute myself. So Attila, how do you see that kind of, when we talk about loyalty being that decision making, so the customer has arrived, they've maybe found something, it's the same price and free delivery in 3 different places. How can loyalty be the kind of control layer that brands can leverage to be the thing that, the reason that a customer buys from one brand rather than another? So, how really does loyalty play into that decision logic?
Yeah. The biggest challenge is going to be the relevance, how brands can stay relevant for the consumers in this different decision-making process. And the only way if they can, stay relevant, if they give the reason to the agents, how and why the agents needs to prefer that brand over the other. And if you think about the typical, data points, what an agent is digesting, One is the price, the stock, the availability, and some kind of rewards. But it won't be enough. If we really want to make an influence from a brand perspective on the agents, then we need to open up the loyalty structure, the loyalty scheme, the loyalty mechanism. The agents needs to understand, needs to be able to read the loyalty mechanism. And then from that point, loyalty won't be a marketing layer, it's going to be a decision layer, decision logic. And that's a crucial thing because it should be structured as a framework, a benefit framework. And just imagine that agents will be and should be able to participate, to understand, to read why is it good for the human to purchase here, what long-term benefits the consumer can get if the agent is suggesting this brand over the other. So ultimately, the loyalty should be machine readable. That's a crucial element of it.
Mm-hmm. So structured in the right way.
Indeed.
So I'm imagining I just go into my WhatsApp or what interface, Mark, do you see that people are going to be using to, if it's not Google, where are they going to be initially coming in to make these queries? They're going to be in ChatGPT and Claude?
Yeah, ChatGPT, Gemini. It's going to be one of those interfaces that whichever their preference is, depending on the platform that they're on. I think ChatGPT is the one that's probably the one that's really kind of grown this effort to start with. Mm-hmm. But obviously, Perplexity, there are a whole ton of technologies out there that people can leverage to perform this kind of research. Yeah.
So I go into there, I decide I want a new vacuum, washing machine, little black dress. I tell it exactly what I want, and it's going to give me a suggestion. And from there on, I kind of get taken through a buyer journey. Do I end up on a brand site at any point, or do we envisage that that's all just going to be handled from within those platforms?
It's interesting, and you can see how this has changed and pivoted. So it's a hard one to answer. If you look at the original development around ChatGPT and its focus, it started out with product discovery. Then there were connections into payment with integrations through Stripe, for example, to be able to do the checkout. Then there was a back out from the payment process. So they became much more a part in the search and discovery. But if you look at some of the other technologies out there, they are connecting to the payment process. So some are very focused on making sure they own that experience and that checkout experience, whereas some are just lending themselves as being an intelligence layer for the consumers to be able to perform the research, then drive the traffic there. And this is going to be part of the problem downstream and things like attribution, right? Because if the purchase is all happening off the site, it's happening in other ways, all you're really getting is a transaction. You're not getting any of the search history. You're not getting any of the intelligence.
Yeah, I was going to say, as a brand, I feel like that's an uncomfortable place to be in, because you can't even do an abandoned basket email if you want to, because you don't even have that visibility.
Exactly. And that's where in some ways, I do my search in the background, but penultimately for me, I end up on the website where I make the purchase, and I can do my last validation and checks. How many times have you uploaded a document into one of these technologies and got it to summarize, and 90% of it's right, but 10% of it's hallucination, and there's things that are stated and said that are not right? So for me as a consumer, there's a 10% element of me that wants to just validate those things myself in person on the website before I make the purchase. But there would be many people in the 18 to 24 demographic that won't. I think the people that do are the people that are used to buying in the traditional sense and will still rely on their own kind of research as well on top of that, but use it as the starting point.
And just thinking to Attila's point around structured data, even the things that show up in just the Google shopping results, there are things that aren't in stock where the pricing's wrong. So even just a simple feed that should be up-to-date data doesn't necessarily work as straightforward as it should do. So as exciting as this all sounds, what could slow it down? Do we think there's going to be resistance from brands? Like where does this come apart at the seams a bit? Mark, sorry, I'll put that over to you.
So So I think there are three areas where there's not an answer for everything today, and that there's going to be more work required. We kind of touched on part of it, right? Which was around trust and payments. So the moment an agent starts spending money on your behalf, the question becomes obvious to me: did the customer really authorize this? Who is liable if things go wrong? And that's where I think, tokenized payments will come in. So tokenized payment is a bit like, we've all used things like Apple Pay and Google Pay. I say we all, but increasingly, even people with the supermarket, when I'm behind them in the queue, are checking out and doing their shopping on their phone, right? And at that point, it generates a payment token, and that token basically is like a mandate. So it's like you can spend up to £200 a month on groceries, but only at these merchants. So these guardrails are there to kind of protect people, but we're still in the infancy of this working in the concept of agentic commerce for an LLM. The second part we've kind of touched on, a part which is the data structure, right? Which is identity. Today, your one-to-one personalization is tied to cookies primarily, device IDs or logins, but normally on your own surface, like your website, right? So when you use ChatGPT or Gemini and the agent checks out, for the merchant's perspective, you might only see an API call or a shipping address. You've lost, as you mentioned already, all of that contextual history around that. And platforms like Shopify are starting to bridge that. So they have their Shopify ID, so that an agentic order that looks like a customer in their ecosystem can even include things like POS, so they can bridge that kind of online and offline. But also more broadly, brands need identity and loyalty to become a shared infrastructure and APIs that agents can effectively tap into to understand things like clear consent as well, right? So there's this kind of consent element. And the third bit we kind of touched upon a little bit, but I can't emphasize how important it is, which is the attribution collapse. So our current models always assume that there's a visible click or an impression, whereas in agentic journeys, the discovery and evaluation might be completely invisible to your analytics because you don't have that data. And all you just see is a deep link or the order. And that's why I'd encourage brands to kind of explicitly create like AI agent channels in their analytics and combine that with self-reported data so that they can tell, I found you via ChatGPT rather than relying purely on the last click, because that's going to kind of help with kind of that measurement. Because if you don't solve trust, identity, and attribution, for me, like you can build some impressive demos as a brand and you can show the kind of customer experience you're delivering, but you're delivering very little compounding value back to the business as a result. I was going to say, Attila, what worries you on this topic the most from a brand perspective, especially because as it relates to loyalty, because this will have an impact, right?
It's a tough question, and it's a definitely challenging one. And what you said about the changes of the consumer behaviors, how we are conducting information and searching and browsing, basically we are moving away from the Google model and we are entering to so we have new highways like the ChatGPTs, the Anthropics or Claudes and these kind of highways. And the rules are different here. And what I see and feel is that brands, not every, but a lot of brands are, underestimating how much the decision power they might lose and move away from them because they simply won't be able to control. And the things that you just said about identity, attribution, that's going to be a big problem. And therefore, we need to give the reason to the agent to, choose us over the others. And one of the reasons can be feeding with more information, more benefits, more things that they can give to their consumers. Why the agent is listing one brand over the other when the agent is conducting the list for the consumer. And the problem, if they're losing control, then it's going to be challenging how they can formulate or having effect on the preference list for the consumers. And therefore, the visibility of the value, the brand value, is going to be a challenge. And then at the end, if they are not taking actions, these brands are not taking actions, then it's going to be a pure price or just a stock or availability comparison, which I'm sure none of the brands want to enter into this situation, because
And
it's going to be painful.
We have a question from Chloe that she says, what does this mean for B2B loyalty when it's not just about product comparison, but also about service and partnership? Does AI negate this in product comparison choices? Which is a really interesting one, because it talks again to being able to surface more of the information. I guess reviews play into that as well. So as much information as can be drawn out, I guess, and shared. But Mark or Attila, do you have any other thoughts on Chloe's question there?
I think that the difference won't be fundamentally different than what's going to happen with consumers. Of course, what Catherine said about reviews, forums, and so many other things that can influence the decision, the agent's decision, but still the situation is the same. The direction of the vector is the same, and that's the point. Mark?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's probably less of a B2B use case and more of a service use case. But I'll give you an example. Recently, I was toying with an upgrade on my stereo on my car. And although that's a B2C consumer thing, I researched out what the options were without me having to cut holes. I worked out what I could fit into the existing infrastructure. It managed to work out that the model of my vehicle didn't have enough lining for the size of speaker that I wanted to do. So that would be a thing I would do. It worked out which person locally could fit it. And it gave me a price comparison for the installation for it across all of the vendors, so that I could make a decision about whether I was to travel further afield to get it fitted or not. Now, there is an element there that there is a mixture of product, there's a mixture of service, there's a mixture of other aspects. That's very hard to get from one website, but I was able to do a tabular comparison using LLMs of that kind of purchase, which is combining service and product. And I think it's very apt in the B2B world, because in the B2B perspective, you are going to be looking at comparing mixture of product and service and a whole bunch of things. And that's where LLMs are actually incredibly powerful. But back to the point of loyalty, the B2B loyalty mechanics and the things that are driving that need to be machine readable from your website. And this comes back to like making sure you've got FAQ pages, because when the machine learning is doing its reading, it's looking at your returns policy, it's looking at your FAQs, it's looking at those. Those are the things from a GEO or generative engine optimization perspective, the machine is crawling through to get the information to be able to surface it. So really it's around making sure that your brand and your website and your services are machine readable. And those are kind of two easy tactics that you can do to start to get visibility within those. And then you can test it out, build those pages, do the search yourself, see if you come back. Yeah, it's a good way, like SEO, of testing where you do when you go in Google and you see where your company comes up in the hierarchy. It's exactly the same thing within the LLM. It's no different.
Can you trust it? Is it not just going to say, well, we know that you tend to like this website, so we're going to surface this one to you more often, because we know that that's where Google ended up. I remember people saying to me, oh, I always show up on my first page. And I thought, not for me, you don't. So there's an element of bias, I'm sure, and personalization as well, right? So it's going to be different. As Attila said, there's a segment of one there. But really interesting question from Olya, which is, and maybe Mark, I wonder if you'll know the answer to this. What's the percentage of consumers who are using AI for shopping? And I think you already answered about there being a certain demographic. You're saying it's that probably kind of 18 to 24 group. But yeah, do you have any stats on any of that right now?
Yeah, there's numbers that vary across the board. The one thing that we know is that it's growing. One stat that I saw was that US consumers using Gen AI for product research accounted to about 30 to 45% of product searches in 2025. This is a study that I read at Bain, which is a pretty high number of people that are starting to use it. And 64% of shoppers that are interviewed in another study I saw actually said they were likely to use AI to some extent when making purchases, which probably means people are still using more in discovery than the actual purchase itself, but a lot of people have the intent to do it. Yeah. What was really interesting though, and it depends on the type of brand and products that you sell to how important it is that 84% of shoppers in the 18 to 24-year-old age range were using AI for the search or purchase or part of that. So it shows that, like, if you're selling a product to that younger demographic, then it's even more important than maybe the upper demographic to make sure that you have that visibility to not lose out on potential sales to that target audience. So what's evident is, it's growing as a channel. It is a sales channel. It is relevant to specific age groups and audiences and the generation that are very open to using AI in this exploratory way. But yeah, that's the closest I've come to so far to answer that from a statistic perspective and stuff I've read.
But I think this is just a timing question, because we all understand the direction of the vector again, because everyone is going to use it. Obviously, just think about that. Every one of us, whenever we are searching something, probably one of the first things that we do, we ask it from one of the LLM to get answer for. That's something that we are early adopters of these kind of technologies, but that's what's going to happen with everything and everyone for obvious reasons, because we get better answers in no time.
So this is actually happening now. This isn't something a few years away. It's not something that we're talking about very far in the future. It's already happening. So
100%.
And then finally, I think it's an interesting one, and talking about that kind of segment of one, just to briefly come back to that. How do you make sure, this Ava asks, how do you make sure your loyalty program still feels personal if AI is involved? I mean, I find that even if I converse with ChatGPT, it feels pretty personal, but yeah, is that evolved enough, do you think, to make sure that, if you're trusting your kind of conversations with your customers, if you're trusting AI with that, is it going to feel personal enough, or is it going to feel too much like they're talking to a bot?
I think it's going to be personal, because I have multiple agents for multiple things. This is maybe I'm an early adopter, and I am having this kind of form earlier than so many other people, but that's going to be happen with a lot of people. If you think about, for instance, co-work, and one of the things that I do is dealing with my agents, and our agents are bringing me things which is relevant to me. And obviously, if I can make the loyalty program readable by the agent, then the agent will collect all the things which is relevant to me. Therefore, the thing that I get from my agent, from my specialized agent for this purpose, will give much more personal things to me. And this is what we said about make the loyalty scheme, the loyalty structure readable for the agents. That's crucial.
Mm-hmm. Great. So that's the one thing regarding loyalty that brands can do today. Mark, what do you see as if there's 3 things you were going to tell brands to do today to start moving forward in this area? What would you recommend they do?
Sure. First, we've touched upon it a lot. Structure your data. So make sure your product, your content, and your loyalty data are clean and centrally managed. A lot of the technologies which are kind of needing some of that structure is things like the PIMS, so the product information management systems, product experience management systems, modern loyalty platforms like Antavo, and then start exposing those via APIs and where appropriate protocols, like we discussed, like MCP, UCP, ACP, etc. So to Attila's point, making it machine readable, right, as much as anything. The second thing is to think agent as customer. And the reason I say that is for every part of your stack, you need to ask, can a human use this and can a machine use this? If the answer is only a human can use this, that's a risk in this agentic world, right? Because it means you're not exposing the data that's required to A, show up, and B, drive the kind of experience that you want to yield the benefits of agentic commerce. And then I think that the third thing is really around being brave and experiment early. So, like, don't wait for one perfect standard to come along and fix all of these things in one go, but start simple. Start tagging LLM traffic so that you can identify it, and then run small agentic pilots using tools like Bloomrech Discovery as a brain to be able to surface some of those kind of products in the discovery process. and then begin making your loyalty incentives machine readable, as we kind of mentioned with Antavo, and then those experiences, how you build your data and your incentives moat. So I think those are kind of key things. So really, it's a shift from designing only for interfaces, for designing for systems, signals, and incentives. That's kind of the shift from those three things and how that feeds into. And I think it's combining the kind of intelligence layer that we're providing to brands today, and then combining with the loyalty component that Antavo kind of provides into that mix, that helps brands start making themselves legible to agents, and the people that do that are the ones that are going to benefit more from this as this kind of motion matures, I would say.
That's just sparked a question from me just in the last 4 minutes that we've got. Certainly what we see with customers, I don't know if you'd agree, Attila, is that it's sometimes the smaller customers who are the earlier adopters of this kind of technology purely through need, because they can't afford to have a data scientist. They need to use Optimizer because they don't want to always use very expensive consultants. They might use the planner. And what we envisage is that that's going to actually catch on, and that larger companies will start to look at how quickly some of the smaller companies and brands are moving. And they're then going to want to adopt this. But I didn't know if you see a similar trend. Is it the smaller, more agile companies who are adopting AI earlier, or are you seeing it being larger companies who are more comfortable and are more forward thinking with that?
What's the question, for Mark or for Max?
Oh, it was for Mark. Yeah. So I think what we see from Antavo is it tends to be it's need driven, but I didn't know if if it's desire driven more. Who you're seeing agents.
Smaller companies are more agile. What it comes to, smaller companies are more agile. Often the younger companies are born into this newer tech world as well, so they're more exploratory. Companies that have existed longer, that are larger, quite often have more complex enterprise stacks, monolithic technologies, less API driven technology stack. These all add barriers and complexity to market that you just don't have when you're either smaller or when you've started from scratch with the right technology choices. So when you look at some of the commerce platforms like Shopify and how they kind of evolved and grown so well, it's that kind of flexibility, it's the composability, it's all those aspects which almost future-proof your investment towards these type of initiatives. So I think that's why you're seeing smaller companies are more agile, but also mid-market companies with flexible stacks are also able to act very quickly on these kind of things as well, I think.
Okay, so they're probably going to lead the charge in this, and other brands will look to them for what works and I guess what doesn't. Great. Any closing thoughts, either from yourself, Attila, or you, Mark? I'll come to you first, Attila.
Yeah. So first of all, when we are thinking about loyalty, loyalty is a well-known institutional way how brands are exchanging data with consumers. So loyalty is not just about spend $1 or earn a point or collecting badges. It's much more really an institutional way how the transaction is happening between these two parties. And Agentic or AI, the LLMs, they do understand it. That's very important. Therefore, treat loyalty as an infrastructure for all these things, not just marketing layer top of everything. Therefore, put your loyalty initiative as the core element of your GTM strategy. It's very important. And of course, as we discussed and highlighted a couple of times, make this initiative, this scheme, and not just this one, but a lot of other things as well, machine readable, machine understandable. That's crucial. And ultimately, when we think about loyalty is really a data play in the agentic era. Therefore, collecting and building out the data lakes about our consumers, our customers, how and what they think, how they are sharing their direct data is golden, is crucial for the future in the agentic world. So these are my final thoughts.
Great, thanks. And anything else from yourself, Mark, to close us out?
Yeah, just as a final thought from me, is really around agentic commerce being best understood, not as a new channel, but as a new operating model for how brands are discovered, chosen and transacted with. I think where we've been focused is trying to establish a credible role in making the discovery, engagement and analytics stack usable by agents. And I think that's where the partnership with Antavo has been useful, because they have a credible role in making loyalty and incentives legible to them too. So I think brands that build both of those kind of layers together will be far stronger than those that wait for standards to settle before acting. So again, coming back to my point about being brave and relevant, I think there's some really good grounding between the respective technologies to be able to deliver some of those experiences today. And I think the brave brands that start to adopt this quicker are the brands that are going to yield the rewards and grow and as you said, like if they can demonstrate agility and adoption, it adds a whole new source of revenue to them that they can't recognize today, which I think is compelling enough to invest in this area. So
yeah, great. I think it's a great takeaway. Be brave, be relevant.
100%.
Great. Thank you so much, and thanks everybody for the questions and for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.